Hey guys, I'm Rich. Welcome to Rich with Cars. Today I got a 2023 Genesis G80 Electrified. Now, I was not expecting to get a hold of this car, but to my surprise and a pleasant surprise, I ended up getting this. So, as always, I want to give you guys a quick overview of this vehicle and give you guys some sort of insight on how this car compares to the rest of the electrified or EV lineup of luxury sedans. I think it's a great option for anybody looking for electric vehicles. Still, as always, it still does not compare to Tesla because of the network, and that basically applies to any vehicle that's outside of the Tesla network except for Ford and GM that now will be having access to the Tesla network as well. But nevertheless, I'll be doing a quick overview of the exterior, interior, cargo volume, and then of course the powertrain, because in this case it's not an internal combustion engine, and then of course driving impressions. Let's take a look and strap in. Genesis ended up coming out with the electrified version of the G80 in 2023. So this is actually the first model year that Genesis came out with a fully electric sedan, in this case being the G80. So at first glance, if you don't have a trained eye, if you're not really an enthusiast, you won't really notice that this is an EV. It does have a lot of the same design. It basically retains all of the design from the regular G80, but of course with some very minor differences, namely the front grille, which over here you'll see there's no real opening in the grille. Everything over here is all blocked off, and then this bottom portion is a little bit different as well. Now the cool thing, of course, is they also managed to integrate the distance control, radar, all over here. Unless you really take a close look, you won't notice, but there is sort of a transparent area over here where all the radar stuff is. And then the other really cool thing is your charge port does not show up anywhere except for here. And if you don't know, you won't really know it is there. So if you push on this, you'll get access to the electric charger. And what I like about this is that it's not electric, it's not gimmicky, so it gives less of an opportunity for the charge door to break. Now if we put it back, it goes back to looking like a regular grille. Now everything else will basically look very similar to the internal combustion engine version of the G80. You have the signature Genesis dual lighting with both the daytime running lights, which are these two lines over here, and then of course your headlights. And then the bottom portion will have a different design than the regular G80, with this area over here, and then a little bit of some functional air curtains as well. We'll see a different design on the wheels. I don't know if these are more aerodynamically fluid, but these are sort of a different wheel design for the electric version of the G80. These are 19-inch wheels. The signature side marker design. The whole profile of the vehicle is the same. Nothing here in the rear will basically tell you that this is an electric vehicle. Once again, we see the natural Genesis design of the dual lights or the double lights. We have the rear camera over here with a button to open the trunk. There's no denomination anywhere along the car that says this is an EV. Of course, you'll see G80 over there, but we won't see EV anywhere else on the vehicle. So the G80 Electrified only comes, if I'm not wrong, in the Prestige trim. So you won't be able to get the G80 Electrified in any other trim. So that means that the interior will be fully decked out in full luxury, and you'll get all the convenience that you do with the Prestige trim. And that includes this Lexicon sound system, where you can see the speaker grill over here very nicely integrated into the door card. And then of course you have some leather trim here on the side, some additional leather here, and then some nice plastic injected mold. This door handle is very common on the Genesis models, and then you have your window controls and your side view mirror controls alongside with the door unlock and lock. And then you have a little bit of space here for maybe one 500 ml bottle and a few or a couple of small other items in there as well. So it's not super large, despite the fact that it is a relatively large sedan. This does compete with, let's say, the likes of the 5 Series in terms of size, and most likely this will compete also with the new i5, which will be coming out soon. Now, from a seat perspective, this is a 16-way power seat. It does have a massage control function as well, which is good, that a lot of the other luxury prestige trims have along the Genesis lineup. And generally speaking, the seat is actually quite comfortable. I found it to be a little bit stiffer than the one in the GV80. And then of course, you do have some bolstering over here and bolstering here at the bottom portion as well. Design wise, relatively nice. You have some mild quilting over here or some nice stitching in the back portion alongside with the bottom portion of the seat. But I do like the contrast piping that you see here on the black Napa leather with some white piping to contrast it quite nicely. So you have easy entry, so that means that the steering wheel and the seat will get closer and the steering wheel will lower down. And then when you start the vehicle, of course there's no engine noise, it's fully electric, and you have some nice little chimes upon starting the vehicle. I'm not a big fan of the steering wheel. I don't like the 4-spoke, kind of gives it sort of a older feeling, but you do have very similar sort of layout in terms of the buttons as some of the other Genesis models. Same type of stalks for both the wiper and the turn signals, including the lighting. You have these paddle shifters where on some of the other vehicles these will be the gear changes for plus and minus, but in this particular case this means that you have regenerative braking. So I'm clicking right now on the right hand side lever of the steering wheel, and that decreases the regenerative braking. Now if I click on the left hand side, and you guys can see over there, it increases regenerative braking until the point which I go to the max, and then it shows I pedal, which means that you can basically drive single pedal because the regenerative braking is at its maximum potential and you can brake on its own. In terms of the gauge cluster, this is very similar to what all the other Genesis lineup vehicles are. This is extremely similar, if not the same, as what I have on the Genesis GV80. The only difference is that this dial over here, it doesn't show any of the revs. It just shows the power and the charge levels when I'm driving, whether I'm pushing or letting go of the gas. On this side, that's the amount of battery that I have remaining on the vehicle, showing me the amount of range remaining with the amount of battery that I have. Now, in terms of the remainder, this is very similar to the regular G80. You have a mix of buttons and some digital screens with your dials for your temperature control. This is your dial to modulate, which will allow you to either twist it, allows you to go backwards, forwards, choose a different part of the menu, up or down, and then you can click down to select. This is your gear selector, and it's also the same as the regular internal combustion version. A couple of cup holders, your wireless charger alongside with 2 USB-A, which I'm very surprised being 2023 and this being a newer model. It should have been USB-C, but still 2 USB-A plugs in there, one for charging the phone, which gives it a better amperage or power, and one to connect for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but it's not wireless, it has to be wired through there. Middle compartment over here, which has some additional storage, not that big, but you do have a 12-volt outlet over here, and then some additional storage in the middle over there. You can actually remove this portion. Very nicely done. Like other Genesis models, we have Alcantara here on the ceiling, no sunroof, leatherette on the upper portion of the dash, open pore wood, like you have on many other Genesis models. So very, very nicely finished. And then a typical common thing of Genesis models is the fact that you can move the seats from this side of the passenger seat. So that gives you the ability of moving this seat from other parts of the vehicle. So looking at the rear seating area of the G80 Electrified, you do have some manual sunshades. You have your lexicon speaker grills with some additional space here, not too big, and then your controls for the window. The rear area of the G80 Electrified is pretty spacious. This seat right now is moved further behind than my typical driving position. I'm 6'1", and even though this is moved even further behind, I still have about an inch of space between my knee and the back of the seat. The other cool thing is that there are little small indentations in the rear of the seat to allow you to get more space for the knee area. This is a 3-zone climate control. You can change your fan speed, your temperature, on, off, auto, and then the area where you want it to actually blow. It's kind of cool that you could get some fan control at your feet here in the rear. Some cup holders, and then this is pretty cool. It does have a rear sunshade button. If I press that, that sunshade over there comes up, or I can just take it down as well. Pass through over here. So it does give you access to the rear trunk area. I'd say compared to the 5 Series, this definitely has more space in the rear because it doesn't have a transmission tunnel. There's no hump here in the middle of the back. So here in the rear trunk area, you guys will notice that because of the battery, some trunk space was taken up for the electrified version, and that means you have this massive hump that takes up a little bit of the trunk space. I can remove some of this and it'll give you some additional space here at the bottom. That's where you have your charging cables. But generally speaking, it's relatively spacious. You do have a nice large opening here. I'll show you guys on the screen how much cargo capacity you have, and I'll compare it to the G80 numbers just so you guys have an idea of how much space you've actually lost because of the battery in the rear. Aside from that, you do have small areas over there like with a cargo net, one there, another one here as well. But overall, not too bad for being originally an internal combustion engine that's been turned into an electric vehicle. Now I just wanted to show you guys what it looks like under the hood, because we do not have an internal combustion engine, but we do have an electric motor. Quite similar, because let's not forget it is based off of an internal combustion engine platform. You do have some nice bracing over here, and I'll show you guys the general numbers of, you know, how many kilowatts, the horsepower, the range, all that sort of stuff, because unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar when it comes to that. I literally got taken by surprise with this vehicle, so I didn't get a chance to really look into it. Okay guys, so driving the 2023 Genesis G80 Electrified. I've driven also the G80 internal combustion version, and I can tell you that this car feels very similar in terms of the interior comfort, the steering even, feels very similar to the ICE version of this car. I'm doing sort of a single pedal drive at 3/4 or 4/5 brake regeneration. Let's put it at the maximum. So once I let go of the go pedal, it brakes quite a bit. It's very intense, the braking feel. And also I'm driving an Eco, and if I floor it, I wouldn't say it's extremely fast, but there's definitely quite a bit of torque feel, and it does push quite quickly. Say for example I change the drive mode to sport, the gauge cluster changes, it looks a little bit more sporty. It's got those sort of bars across the speedometer. Wow, and I'm already over the speed limit. So very, very, very strong pickup when you put it into sport. It's incredibly fast. I believe that this car does 0 to 60 in about 4.1 seconds, which is not that bad for almost a full-size sedan. Let's go once again full throttle. Wow. Yeah, it definitely, I don't know if you guys noticed, it definitely pins me on my seat. And the brakes also are pretty good. The steering feel is quite soft. It's not extremely responsive, but it's responsive enough, let's just say, to do some sort of emergency maneuvers to avoid something, but it's not sporty enough to be a sports car. This would be a great car for somebody that is going from a regular internal combustion engine vehicle to EV and they want to give it a try, because everything in here feels like a regular ICE vehicle, but then of course the powertrain is different. You don't have to adapt to all the new things that an EV car brings to you. Even the steering feel, like I said, is still quite nice and very similar to the one that is in the ICE version of this car. The other thing that I do like is that when you do change the different drive modes, which you have 3 different ones, comfort, eco, and sport, the steering feel is also quite different. Now you guys see that I'm slowing down. I'm not putting my foot on the brake. I've only been putting my foot on and off the go pedal. I really did enjoy this vehicle quite a bit, just because you don't have to go through a massive learning curve to jump into an EV car. And for this car, you have the feel of a regular internal combustion engine with the powertrain of an EV. I believe this has a range of about 280 to 300 miles, if I'm not wrong. It's not that bad, but it's also not at the top of, you know, the entire EV class of vehicles. It's still pretty good. The only downside, like I mentioned earlier, is the fact that this does not fall into, let's say, the Tesla network of chargers. But this, like many others, and that's why I don't actually fault Genesis for this, it's sort of just an entire EV industry sort of thing. Since it doesn't fall into the Tesla network, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get used to it in terms of the convenience of having an EV. Ultimately, I think this is probably one of the top vehicles that you should consider if you are considering an EV, because if you don't want to go through that sort of very steep learning curve of getting into an EV, this is just the right car for you. And it's got plenty amounts of luxury in the vehicle. And in the price range, which is about, I believe, $81,000, it does come with all the bells and whistles. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this quick overview of the 2023 Genesis G80 Electrified. For me, it was an absolute pleasure to drive this. It was a complete surprise that it drove that well for an electric vehicle. If you guys are considering an electric vehicle to put into your garage and you don't want to go through a massive learning curve, I think that this car should be on the top of your list. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. As always guys, once again, thank you very much for all the support, all the views, and as always, stay tuned for more car content and news and events. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks, take care.